Hey everyone, I just thought it'd be fun to do a little behind the scenes on the latest animation I did. It was my very first Blender project. My name is Kevin Herron. I'm a former feature film animator. I've worked on really cool shows like Into the Spider-Verse, as well as Mitchell's vs. the Machines and Angry Birds 2. I'm also a former animation TV supervisor. I worked on Dragon Prince seasons 4 through 7. And I'm also a former Student Academy Award-winning short film animator. I'm really excited and have been getting inspired by all these really cool indie television animations coming out, like Milky Way, Subway Galactic, and Big Top Burger, as well as The Amazing Digital Circus. They're all really terrific, awesome shows. And I see it and I come home and I'm like, oh man, I wish I could be doing something fun like that in my free time as well. So I know for me, since I'm inspired by these really fun indie shows, I would love to get there someday, but I'm not there today. So my first goal is to actually make small incremental steps to improve to be able to do what they're doing. That now led me to need to decide what kind of software I'm using. And Blender was a really easy choice. It's open source, it's free. A lot of people have been making really cool content for it. So it has a lot of features I know I'm excited to learn and use. But DaVinci Resolve was the other program that also really jumped to me when I was trying to find what are free alternatives to video editing software so I can compile the video at the end. And it has a lot of really cool features. So I highly recommend it if you're also looking for a video editing software. And it has just as much documentation for Blender or as Blender. So now that I have my goals and I know what software I'm going to use, it's time to come up with an action plan, and speed was really on my mind because I didn't want to fall for the trap of starting a bunch of projects or having a lot of ambitions but not actually following through. So the more bite-sized I could make it, the more I know I'm going to incrementally be improving and getting to where I would like to be, hopefully in the near future after a couple of years. To narrow my scope, I chose to do the animation inside of Maya and then import it into Blender to then light render composite and do a majority of the work that is not animation. So simple poly modeling, particle simulations, as well as fur, to name a few. So yeah, the next step after that was coming up with a realistic schedule to know if I'm falling behind on my work. I figured 4 weeks to animate, but I also didn't want to make it where it was 4 grueling weeks where it felt like overtime after work to do work. So I come home and I set the schedule of 4 weeks, knowing that there's going to be some days I'm going to not work, and there's going to be some weekends where I'm going to be off with my family and having a fun time enjoying the summer. And that actually turned out to be really great. It got me more excited to sit down in the animation chair and do some work if I had to skip a night. And then some weekends I was really excited to like come home and work, or just try to do as much as I could on a single Sunday night or Saturday. So 4 weeks did feel like the appropriate amount of time for how large this shot was. And I also did try to look for ways to cheat it, like not necessarily animating everything that's off screen. But I also thought 4 weeks would be enough to do the Blender side, which I was completely wrong about. I actually overextended into 6 weeks. I think there was some creep scope there, trying to solve other problems or just running into a huge problem with the fur later on, which I'll dive deeper into. But I didn't account for the learning curve and how much time that would take. So in the future, I should probably pad it, but also maybe look at how difficult some of these things are and maybe pull back on some of those things. But yeah, I think the last step I did to really help speed up this project was going to the idea generation station. I knew I wanted to animate in Maya, so I should use a Blender, or use a rig that I'm familiar with. I know I'm familiar with Mr. Buttons. I did quite a few shots with him during COVID for myself when I used to stream animation. So I thought I would use this fun, easy rig. I'll provide the link down below in case anyone's interested in animating with Mr. Buttons. He's a fun free rig that's pretty versatile and has some fun cartoony features. He's just not perfect, just to warn you. I also looked up some free software that I could use. Since it's indie, I need to keep the budget down. So I was trying to limit how many things I had to purchase. I did end up buying Animbot because it's just such a useful animation tool suite. But I was quite tired of using Anim School's Picker just because the license keeps expiring and it's always a hassle. I found Dreamwall Picker. I highly recommend it. If you want to try using Dreamwall Picker and want to try using Mr. Buttons, I made a picker for him. Just leave a comment so I know it's worth the effort to actually upload the picker somewhere and figure out how to do that for you guys. But yeah, it's pretty much just like the Anim School Picker. There are some bugs, but there's also some features I liked about being able to quickly select a set or select the opposite side. I just really enjoy it, and I prefer having a GUI over the quick select sets that Animbot has because I just need to see the visuals to quickly select things. This makes it a lot easier for my brain. Hey everyone, Future Kevin over here. I realized I didn't talk about how I actually came up with the animation or really dive deeply into the animation behind the scenes. So the project started off with me knowing that I wanted to use Mr. Buttons. So I started generating a bunch of ideas. What are generic things cats do that would resonate with the general audience? I went and I watched the latest Garfield movie as well, just as kind of some inspiration. It was super funny, really great job. There was some awesome parkour physicality scenes. It made me actually consider and brainstorm maybe a cat jumping up a cat tree. However, I really didn't like how a lot of the ideas I was generating didn't have character acting in them, or they weren't really character driven. Eventually, I thought about how cats like to knock things over when they're bored out of entertainment, and that was really starting to resonate with me. So here you can see some of my early sketches, and they're just like cheap and easy, uh, very quick and generic of exploring that first idea with the cat tree. But then it wasn't until over here where I thought about putting in the basic building blocks of what were the major beats of a cat knocking something over for entertainment. Once I kind of was sold on that idea of knocking something over, I just wasn't sold on the staging yet. So I think it was because originally it was on a balcony and it was just kind of waist up acting, and I wanted to do full body. So I eventually landed with the staging of the couch and the table, and kind of explored that a little bit further in 3D, moving around the scenes. I put in just like a cube and Mr. Buttons and a sphere and just moved the camera around until I landed with something that was cool. I felt like it's a lot of walking, but there's some physicality in there with room to jump onto the table. And I used straight ahead animation to just kind of resolve different beats that I didn't plan out in my thumbnailing stage. I used mostly the thumbnails to solve big problems, but straight ahead animation to solve the little acting decisions. For those who don't know, straight ahead animation is one of the animation styles. There's actually several in 3D. You know, there's pose to pose, where you really design out what is the key storytelling pose. There's layered animation, where you might work with the root or whatever is the driving force of the object and just kind of animate that, and then start to animate the controls resonating from there. And there's straight ahead. That's basically just going from frame one, the last frame, and just animating. So since I knew the storytelling beats, I just animated going a few frames at a time, like 30, deciding what I wanted. And then I let the character kind of dictate the pose. And I would say, all right, well, need him to jump on the table, jumps on the table. I wanted to have some fun physicality there, so I had him catch himself. When I knew I wanted that feeling of him stopping with the hands out, I was like, okay, well, how do I now get him over to the cup? Came up with that fun little shuffle. And then, well, how do you knock over a cup that's entertaining like this? I thought I actually did have an old version where he knocked it over in a different way and leaned over in a different way. But I think coming back the next day or maybe that evening, I decided to delete my animation and start over because a better idea showed up. And yeah, and that's straight ahead animation. It's very, very fluid and very fun. And it works really well when you're aligned with the director, which is me. So it worked out for this personal project. At any rate, back to the video. Next, I'd just like to talk about the fun things that I learned in Blender. But ironically, the first part is actually the things that I had to learn in Maya to bring it into Blender. So the first step was actually to, this is in hindsight, so this is something I learned that I would recommend and I'm definitely going to do for my next project, is switching Maya into meters. I believe the default is inches or maybe centimeters, but there was such a massive scale issue that Blender has a lot of default values, especially for like furs or systems that are using meters. So I ended up getting stuck with these really small numbers like 0.003, and trying to work in those fine-tuned numbers was a lot more difficult. So it might even cause some of my implosions or crashes later on. So I would highly recommend changing your Maya default preferences, which is very easy to do. You hit the little gear icon and changing the scene or the Maya's measurements into meters and just beginning to work in meters. The next step I was going to recommend is actually ABC exports, and to make sure you check the UV boxes. If you are not a 3D animator, you might not be familiar with UV sets. If you just think of those chocolate-covered Easter bunnies, they have a foil wrapped around them. You unwrap that and smooth it out flat. That is a UV. It is basically a 2D image that tells the computer how to wrap it around a 3D object, and you paint directly on that 2D image. If your rig does not have that, or your file that you're exporting does not have that UV set, it won't know how to apply those textures to that 3D object. So for anyone who's not familiar with 3D, I hope that makes sense. But if you are familiar with 3D, then just please remember to go in the checkbox of Alembic cache exports and make sure you turn on UV sets. So now in Blender, the first cool thing that I thought was phenomenal and saved me so much time was actually the HDRi faux environment. I'll share the tutorial, and links to everything I used will be down below in case I forget to mention it. But this was so cool. It saved me so much time. There's several websites online where you can just download full HDRi images for free, and it projects the HDRi image. And for those who don't know, that's like a 360 image that has a lot of information, like lighting information as well as like ray trace reflection information. And it projects it inside of a cube. And then what it does is it does backface culling, so you can see through the cube to the interior of the cube and see the HDRi image. So it was really novel, really smart, and saved me a bunch of time. The only thing I would recommend is that you really spend a fair amount of time looking for the perfect HDRi image. They're all free and they're all online, so it's really tempting to just get settled on the first one, but I found that it wasn't until I got to the third or sixth image that I was like, oh, this is actually something that looks really good, and hit my vision of what I wanted the scene to look like. Next up is the simple poly modeling. There's so many tutorials online, and I'm happy to say if you're ever a Maya user, just stick with the Blender hotkeys. All the tutorials use the Blender hotkeys, so they're much easier to follow if you just stick with those. I find Blender, to be frank, the GUI system, like where's edges and where's, the option box for this or that, they're usually hidden in all these like sub hotkeys or subfolders. It's a little hard to find. So, but yeah, if you're familiar with simple poly modeling in Maya, it's the exact same in Blender. So I was able to model things fairly quickly and easily, and I'm sure it'll speed up along the way. So I didn't use any tutorials to like model my cup, but most of the things I was modeling were quite simple, like a cylinder for the table. But yeah, it was just super fun to knock those out really quick and learn that, hey, it's not that difficult. The things you learn in Maya really transfer over to Blender fairly easily. The The really cool thing that I loved was this dynamic paint feature. So thank you so much to the guy who showed that to me. Dynamic paint, if to describe it, it can do a lot of things actually. It can actually change your texture, or so it looks like a paint is actually being painted on. But I used it to displace vertices, and that is when the cat is walking on the couch, his foot actually pushes down the couch cushion. Could have done that in a lattice, but I thought how annoying to grab all these different lattice points and line them up with the foot and to get it timed, because if I choose to shift over the animation, I would have to shift over that. So it's actually super helpful and great, kind of a set and forget type of thing. But there were a few things I really need to recommend or that I learned along the way that I'm going to do for next time. The first is to actually use a lower poly mesh on what you're deforming. The higher poly it is, the more perfect silhouette, but I found the fall off on the set it for the dynamic paint feature couldn't fall off far enough. So when I upped the mesh quality on my chair asset that I grabbed, it was a little too much. So I had to revert the file and go back down, and it ended up working a lot better. Next up was actually using a 3 different invisible spheres. I parented one to each part of the foot, back, middle, front, and that actually helped a lot, because if the cat was leading with his heel, the heel interacted with the chair first, and then the foot came down. If he led with the toe or the toe drag, that would still interact with the sofa, and it looked great. So yeah, those were the 2 things on dynamic paint that I learned that I just wanted to share. Tutorials down below. And speaking of chairs, I wanted to say as well, I did not model that one. I found that one online and it came textured. So thank you so much to the person who uploaded and shared that for free. I'll share the website I used, but there's many websites that you can use to find assets online, and that was a great way to help speed up my workflow. The next thing, which was the most incredibly hard thing in this whole endeavor, was the fur. I spent way too long doing fur, and I actually found many different ways to do fur, a lot of different techniques. I settled with the geometry node because the actual fur dynamic hair was imploding. I think it was because it was a limbic cache, and I had an issue with a limbic cache with some UV sets being overlapping. So I just settled, and it was okay. I think I have something that works, but it's definitely the place I have the most improvement for. So I just hobbled together a few tutorials. They're down below if you want to try it yourself, but just know I struggled, so I wish you better luck than me. Last up was textures, or actually, yeah. Well, let's go with it. Textures. Texturing was quite fun. That was just a quick YouTube search for whatever I needed. Cork, glass, marble. There's always a 2-minute tutorial, so I thought that was so cool. But that's also the thing I think I struggled. I would love to learn more. The node editor is such a mystery to me. Like, people knowing to go grab this math node and plug this vector into that. I don't know how you guys figure that stuff out, so I really need to learn that, as well as compositing. Compositing was something I just had to skip, as well as Foley music. I know I shared that I'm trying to do these things indie, so I'm trying to do them for cheap. But I just didn't have the time to go onto SoundDogs or these other free Foley websites to try to find all of the audio I needed to craft my own Foley sound effects. But I'm debating on actually purchasing Krotos, a monthly subscription there. If you haven't heard of it, it looks really cool. I don't know how to describe it, but they use it in television and movies sometimes to help create Foley art. Like, looks kind of cool. I hope I could learn to use it, but I'll have to do a little bit more investigation there. Okay, so I actually remembered the one I skipped, which was particle simulations. I thought this was going to be so hard. I was so intimidated, but it was incredibly easy. This is a must-do tutorial. It's really fun. Have a whack at it. I really want to do more like cool ambient scenes now, doing smoke. It looks so cool. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much to Sanctuary 1990 for leaving the comment in the last video. I know I owe you like a fun New York City story, but think this video has gone on long enough, so maybe I'll just leave you a quick one. There's this one time that I was leaving work, and it was snowing horrifically, like so bad, and I couldn't really see. I just had a beanie on, and was just trying to walk home so fast. Uh, and so my head was down. I'm not really looking where I'm walking, and out of nowhere, when I'm on the last block before my house, I just feel someone like hit the top of my head and knock over my beanie, and I freak out. I'm ready to punch somebody. I'm ready to defend myself, but really I'm just shivering and cowardly inside. And I turn around, fist up, ready to punch somebody, and I just see this tree limb going like that. So I got duped by a tree. I know that's probably not the most fun story, but at least I kept my promise for you. So thank you guys so much. Any recommendations or comments down below, would appreciate it. Have a great day, and thanks so much for your time. Bye.